This is The Extraordinary Project. I'm Suzanne Clores, and as I was on the way to the airport 6 months later to fly to San Francisco to meet up with EL, I was thinking about belief and how tenuous and conditional it is. If you aren't up to speed on who EL is and why I was conflicted about believing her, here's a quick review. In episode 4, I met EL at a psychic conference in Las Vegas, and we hit it off. She seemed like an entirely relatable person, until she started channeling my dead grandmother, really accurately. Not just describing her clothes and messages to me, but letting her spirit into her body. And since then, I've been pondering how such a phenomenon could happen. My big revelation: belief is like a hall of mirrors. Here's what I mean. We're raised to believe certain things about the world and our role in it. And then one thing changes and the whole hall starts shimmering and reflecting, and the picture becomes much more complex. That was happening to me now. This whole idea that EL could somehow see into my past, that her consciousness could cross space and time, it was making me woozy. If that was true, and I wasn't sure that it was, then where did my mind end and others begin? Did we all overlap? Was it actually possible that all of our minds are connected? To be honest, I almost didn't want to know. That happens a lot in this project. I get close to really fascinating information, and then I want to run away screaming. Because believing it means everything changes. Until I met EL, a lot of what I knew was theoretical. And theory, well, it's a lot safer than belief. You could point to a piece of paper or a set of numbers on a chart. There's almost no risk. But now I was walking onto a plane chasing down a practitioner. And while part of me knew I would always wonder if I didn't meet up with EL a second time, another part of me wrestled with the question I was almost afraid to ask. Am I going a little too far? Is some part of me looking to be deceived? What I know now from previous episodes is you're supposed to ask these questions all the time, of yourself and of those making psychic claims. Otherwise, it's too easy to get sucked into a fantasy and forget that a practitioner is just a person. Case in point, just as I stepped onto the jetway, I felt my phone buzz and saw that a text had come in from EL. "I'm not coming," it said. So here it was, a test of my will. Do I stay the course and get on the plane and hope for the best? Or do I bail? Do I trust that she'll come around? Or admit that this was a bad idea? I stay the course. I get to San Francisco at night, check into my friend's apartment, and try to ignore the likelihood that EL is not going to show up. Why do I think this? Because what I didn't tell you is between the time we made the appointment and now, I had nearly 12 pages of email correspondence with EL, canceling and then rescheduling our meeting. Her notes were always apologetic, always with good reasons. There were childcare issues, hotel booking errors, and even a freak mudslide on the highway. It was a red flag. Any professional media person would agree. When a subject is this skittish, move on. But I didn't. I tried to be accommodating. Maybe I can come down to you, I offered. Or maybe we can meet at a central point, somewhere between where you are and where I am. I mean, I did think for a minute, what is wrong with me that I can't accept that this woman doesn't want to be interviewed? What is it that I need? I want to go back to the last episode for a moment and revisit why I chose to trust EL in the first place. I know a lot of listeners wouldn't have gone that way. It seems scary and reckless and like the opposite of good judgment. But trust me, when you're in the moment, in the midst of a conversation with a spirit who you can't see, you kind of start making deals with yourself. Like, I knew EL was fully invested in what she was telling me, and I knew that I had a choice of whether or not to believe her. I knew that if I chose to believe her, everything I thought I knew about the natural world would change. But the deal I kept making with myself was, if I chose to not believe her, if I chose to look at this text message as a sign that she was full of it, I'd never find out where she was getting her information. And that, oddly, was more important to me than whether or not the information was accurate. I felt like I was at an important fork in the road, and this meeting would help guide me. I've talked to a lot of scientists on this project, and after a while, all of the theories start to run together, and they collect into a big puddle of maybe. But there's one scientist who offered me an interesting structure, an alternative scientific structure, that made it possible for me to see more clearly how someone like EL could do the work that she does. His name is Dean Radin, and he's the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. It's a large research center in Petaluma, California, devoted to the study of where the metaphysical meets the mind.
And we think of the knowledge pyramid where physics is on the bottom, and then chemistry, biology, psychology. Up way near the top is consciousness. That whole structure is pretty good. Like within each band, each discipline, and there are many, many disciplines in there, the knowledge that has been gained over the past couple of centuries is pretty good. And so I tell my academic colleagues to don't worry about throwing away the textbooks, because we don't have to do that. All we have to do is make a slight shift in terms of what we think that knowledge pyramid is sitting upon. So if it, as is thought about today, it is, you have this pyramid and the bottom layer is physics, and that's the end of it. It's like all matter and energy, and that's all there is. Well, if that's not completely correct, and the whole thing is actually sitting on a layer of, the deepest layer of consciousness or awareness, then it means that everything above that pyramid is permeated, because everything above is always permeated with everything else. In that case, if you intend to do something, it's not happening from the top of the pyramid. Yeah. It's happening because your consciousness permeates everything. And if below the bottom layer of physics is this same kind of awareness, then we can think of physics as precipitating out. Like the physical world precipitates out of this awareness realm. And so your intention has a tiny little piece of that awareness. It's the same stuff. And so when you intend, you literally manifest stuff in the world. You manifest it in exactly the same way that consciousness with a big C is manifesting the universe at large. So that's my riff on how do we begin to approach explanations, because with this relatively minor assumption change, suddenly all of the anomalies of mysticism and psychic phenomena and synchronicities and you name it, they all make sense.
I had to listen to that interview a few times, and it's still a puddle of maybe. Like, maybe conscious awareness is the foundation of everything. Maybe energy and matter do follow after the fact. If that was the case, then picking up on other people's thoughts and even their past experiences, it does start to make more sense. We're all surrounded by this cloud of consciousness, sort of like ocean life is surrounded by the ocean. Some of other people's stuff is bound to seep through into yours. But my mind went back to EL and the question of where she was getting her information. Was she somehow just born naturally able to see or hear the surrounding consciousness of all of our minds? I didn't know, and it was possible I never would know, because even though we tried to work it out with texts and emails and phone calls, she still wasn't coming. But I went to bed that night hopeful. I had brought this amber crystal with me. It's a big, chunky orange crystal, and it's supposed to clear bad energy. I'm not a big crystal collector. They actually sort of give me headaches. But I felt like as I was getting ready for this trip, I needed some kind of good luck talisman. And my eye fell on this crystal, so I grabbed it. And I set it by my bedside, and I had no reason to hope, but I was hopeful. I just felt like she was going to come. I almost fell out of bed when I checked my phone in the morning and saw a text that said she was here checking in. And because I was so certain she wasn't coming, I was actually late to our appointment. I ran into the lobby of the Clift Hotel, and I saw her right away. She is very beautiful, and she was in what looked like an argument with the manager. But I was relieved. It might sound odd to say, but seeing her confirmed that she was a real person, and we really were going to do this. If you've never been to the Clift Hotel, I'll tell you, it has one of the most avant-garde lobbies I've ever seen. Dramatic lighting, weirdly over-designed furniture. It's definitely a place to see and be seen, and not a great hotel for someone who has something to hide. I mention this because until this moment, I was still a little unsure of what EL's game was, if she had a game. And then I saw her in the context of this marvelous place, and I knew she wasn't messing around. She was really showing up and ready to be revealed. So we go up to her suite, I set up my equipment, and we had a long interview, really long, and really good. And at the end of it, I kind of understood better why she was so ambivalent. Her life was weird. So here's what I found out about EL. Yes, she was a licensed foot and ankle surgeon in the state of California. But no, she hadn't been practicing for the last 7 years because she was raising a daughter, alone. Yes, she had family in the area, and yes, they all knew about her gifts. But no, she wasn't strictly a medium or an energy healer. She was what they call a natural psychic. And she had been seeing energies, or you can call them spirits or ghosts, since she was very young.
I was 5 years old. I could see things. I didn't really have a language for it at that time. It wasn't until later. And what I mean by language was that I wasn't able to speak back and forth to them at that time, but I definitely could see them because they look just like people. So I've never really referred to them necessarily as ghosts because when I was very young, they just looked like you and me. You know, I saw their clothes and the whole thing, so.
How did you learn the language to speak with them?
I think it was just over time. It's just a matter of allowance, learning to allow that process of back and forth.
I asked her a lot of obvious questions, one being, did you ever just try to ignore it? Did it scare you?
I tried to ignore it, but it didn't go away. And then I would say when I was about 13 years old, I walked into my parents' bedroom the time my mom and dad were going to bed, and I just saw all these people lined up around my parents' bed waiting to speak to my mom. And I realized that, my mom has this ability as well. It just occurs whenever she's going to sleep at night, and I know she dreams. I don't really get information in my dreams. I know people that do. I get it all day long, all the time. And I know that for some people it bothers them to have it on all the time. But I can kind of put it to the side.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, that step in your shoes, or to try to step in your shoes and feel what that feels like. It sounds like
it would be overwhelming or something.
Like a lot would be happening.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Lynn or Joe, but one of them are on all the time too. They commented about it. I don't know if you've interviewed them.
She was talking about Joe McMoneagle, who I interviewed in episode 3, about his 25-year career as a psychic for the government. And she was right. He did hear things all the time.
Usually I'm in full control with my mind. I can shut everything down within so many meters of me, so I don't hear anything else. But once in a while when I feel like I'm in a weakened state, I can't be in a crowd or I can't be inside a supermarket. I've had 9 surgeries on my spine. And every time I have a surgery and I get out, there's a certain period of time that my mind is kind of scattered. And I just cannot go in a grocery store or anything like that because I'm hearing every crazy person in there.
And there are a lot
in the grocery store.
He had mentioned in his interview how all kinds of psychic information comes into your mind. But if you're working, if you have an assignment, as you would in the military, to find a missing person or documents or other types of intelligence, then you have to learn how to ignore all the other junk that comes in order to suss out the material that is pertinent to your mission. He spent a lifetime learning how to control that process. which has also been a challenging process for EL. She had a life-threatening accident, which I agreed not to go into, right around the time that she was in medical school, and then when she emerged from that accident, she learned that her abilities had changed, or had sort of enhanced. She wasn't just seeing energies anymore, but she was also seeing inside people. More specifically, she was intuiting health information about her patients that had nothing to do with their foot surgery.
I started to see patients, and as I started to touch people, I started to receive information about their life and their personal information, and it became difficult for me not to share it. So I would try to be funny and work it into the conversation, and like, hey, how's your daughter? Does she still run and do those things? And meanwhile try to gently kind of give some information about their life. I would know fractures and things that I wasn't supposed to know, and I got a call one time from radiology, and they were like, how did you know this? And I started to feel the lines were really blurring.
A pivotal moment was when she was pursued by a victim of a violent crime.
I was on my treadmill one day, and this woman appeared in my house, and I tried to ignore her. She kept coming back, and I didn't watch the news or anything at the time. I just went to work and worked out, and finally I turned to her and I was like, what do you want? What can I do for you? And she didn't really speak to me, but she kept popping in and out, and I didn't want to do a missing person. I didn't want to know it because I would see the crime. I would know what happened, and
It's upsetting.
And at the time I didn't know what to do about it.
But she did see the details of the crime, wrote them down, shared the information with friends and family. She was too nervous to go to the FBI, but when the case became public, she had confirmation that her details were spot on.
That was a big turning point for me. For all the years that I had these abilities and I didn't know why or maybe what it was supposed to be used for, this was just my first case that I got information on that it had validation for me.
Eventually, EL connected with the remote viewing community, and she took on clients. She started doing viewings for missing objects and missing persons, and then eventually the stock market, cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin. I take her word for all of this. I can't follow up with financial clients or missing persons clients. It's confidential. But when I ask, she shows me evidence. It was a cold case in Canada. A young man had disappeared and hadn't been seen for months. Law enforcement had no leads, and the family, somewhat desperate, reached out to a remote viewing Facebook community.
I got the TRN for the first view for the Canada case. Going to the TRN 76591137. They wanted to request my services, and they wanted to make sure that I could not only find the person, but if I could verify if a person was alive or no longer here, and the conditions of the person. I feel these people behind me. Gosh, how many are there? There's like 3 or 4. How many is there? Like 4, 5. There's 5 of them. There's 5 of them. Strong confirmation on that. There's like 5 of them. 3, 4, 5. There's a whole bunch of them. A whole bunch of them. And when I do these viewings, I make an audio recording. So as I'm hearing it, I say it out loud. Got my hands up in the air, got my hands up in the air. So that the family and or the tasker receives an audio dictation from me, and they hear me repeating what I'm actually hearing. have my head down, my hands up, have my hands up, have my hands up. Someone's pointing their finger at me. I saw the location that it occurred. I feel there's trees around me. Look over there, look over there. There's dirt, there's trees and things like that. And I was inside the body of the victim. And I say the victim because I knew that this missing person was no longer alive. Put your arms up, put your arms up. I have to keep my arms up in the air. In this particular case, when I jumped into this person's body, I was able to experience what happened to him. It feels like it's some kind of a gag or something. Whatever happens to that person happens to me. If somebody says, get down on your knees, put your hands up, put your hands up. Put your arms up, put your arms up. I have to keep my arms up in the air. I actually hear in my ear, put your hands up, put your hands up. I started to feel his emotions and his emotional state. I feel stupid. I feel like making fun of me. Get his thoughts that were going in his mind that he was feeling during that whole experience. I feel like I want to cry. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to cry.
It was really hard to listen to the tape of a teenage boy with 5 friends on a camping trip in the woods and a prank that went terribly wrong. But she gave the recording to the family, and they were grateful, especially the mom. But that was all she heard. For all she knows, the case is still cold. That's got to be really frustrating, I said to her. Why do you do it?
There are people that are, let's say, abducted, and it's very important for those families to know the state of their loved one. Are they still in reasonable condition, humane conditions, things like that.
In other words, she does these cold cases and missing persons cases regardless of the outcome, regardless of the thanks or rewards she'll get. She does it like a rescue worker tends to a humanitarian crisis. She does it to help people. After our interview, I had a much better sense of who she was and what kind of abilities she had. I wondered what kind of experiment we could do together. With her gifts, probably we could do anything. But we both wanted to do something more fun. So, we headed down to the hotel lobby. The Extraordinary Project was created by me, Suzanne Clores. I wrote this episode and produced it with David Weiner, who wrote the music and made the mix sound so nice. Special thanks to Dean Radin, Joe McMonagle, and E.L.